Welcome back, historians. The Renaissance in Italy. In European history, the years from about 1350 to 1650 were called the Renaissance. The word Renaissance means rebirth. During this time period, people became interested again in art and learning. After the hard years of the Black Death, Europeans became interested in the knowledge of the ancient Greeks and Romans. People became more secular. This meant that, even though religion was still important, people were interested in worldly ideas and events. The Renaissance began in Italy, the center of the old Roman Empire. Italians were surrounded by Roman ruins and art. These ancient examples inspired the Italians in their own art. Another reason the Renaissance was born was because Italian cities were very rich. People could pay painters, sculptors, architects, and other artists to make new works. The powerful states of Italy also encouraged the Renaissance. In Europe, most people lived in the countryside. However, Italy was becoming urban. More people were living in the city than in the country. As a result, a different society began to develop in Italy. People shared ideas about art and learning. Strong economies developed. The states of Italy. The states of Italy were independent of each other and very rich. They built fleets of ships and hired people to fight in their armies. A person who fights in an army for money is called a mercenary. Even though the states fought many wars, no state could beat all the others. The Italian states sat on the Mediterranean Sea. They became rich through trade. The Italians bought Chinese silk and Indian spices to sell in Western Europe. They also sold goods from Europe in the Middle East. Marco Polo was a merchant from Venice. In the 1270s, he traveled to China. There he met Kublai Khan, the ruler of the Mongol Empire. The emperor sent Marco Polo on trips all over China. Marco wrote a book about his travels. After reading his stories, many people wanted to buy China's goods. Florence was the most famous city of the Renaissance. It was the first city to grow rich. It had many famous artists. Florence became rich from trading cloth, mainly wool from England. In Florence, the wool was woven into fine fabrics. Banking was another way people in Florence made money. Merchants needed to know how much the coins from different countries were worth. Florentine bankers set up a system to do this. They used the florin, the gold coin of Florence, to measure the value of other money. Florence's richest family was the Medici family. They owned banks as far away as Flanders, which is today part of Belgium. The people of Venice built their city on many small islands. Long wooden poles in the mud supported their buildings. Instead of making roads, the Venetians built canals and waterways. They used boats to move around the city. Venice also became a major shipbuilding center. A new ruling class. In Italy, old noble families moved to the cities. Rich merchants tried to live like noble families. The sons and daughters of nobles and rich merchants married each other. Their families blended together, and they became the upper class of the city-states. Many city-states were republics at first. A republic is a government controlled by its citizens. Only merchants and artisans could be citizens. When city-states faced war or rebellion, they often gave power to a single person. Some leaders ruled harshly. Others used a more gentle approach. In Venice, the ruler was the duke, or doge. He was the official leader, but a small group of wealthy merchants held the real power. In Florence, the Medici family controlled the government for many years. Lorenzo de' Medici ruled the city from 1469 to 1492. He was known as the Magnificent. Politics in Italy were not simple. The rulers of each city had to stop other rich people from taking power by force. They also had to get along with leaders from other states. To work with others, the Italians developed diplomacy. This is the art of making agreements with other countries. Today's ideas about diplomacy first began in Italy. Niccolò Machiavelli was an official in Florence. He wrote a book called The Prince in 1513. He wrote that rulers should do anything they could to keep power and protect their city. This included killing and lying. Today, when we say someone is being Machiavellian, we mean they are being tricky or sly and acting without morals. Renaissance humanism. In the 1300s, European scholars created a new way of understanding the world. It was called humanism, and it was based on ancient Greek and Roman ideas. Humanists believed that individuals were important. They wanted to use reason, not just religion, to gain knowledge. During the Crusades, Arab Muslims passed on what they knew about Greek and Roman works to Western Europeans. Italians found old Latin writings in monasteries. They also studied old buildings and statues to understand what made them beautiful. Humanist scholars studied mathematics, medicine, biology, and astronomy. Educated people wrote in the classical Latin. They also began to write in the vernacular, or the everyday language that people spoke in a region. When authors wrote in the vernacular, many more people could read their works. In the early 1450s, Johannes Gutenberg invented a printing press that used movable metal type. It could print books quickly. More books were available, so more people learned to read. Scholars read one another's works and wrote letters to discuss their thoughts. These changes helped ideas spread more quickly than ever before. Leonardo da Vinci was one of the most important Renaissance scientists and artists. Most of what we know about him comes from his drawings of scientific projects. Italy's Renaissance artists. Rich Italian families and church leaders paid artists to make paintings, sculptures, and buildings. Renaissance artists followed examples of the ancient Romans and Greeks. They also expressed new humanist ideas. Renaissance painters painted in new ways. They used perspective, a way of showing things as they appear at different distances. Artists studied the human body to help them draw more accurately. They used light and shadows instead of hard outlines to separate objects. This is called chiaroscuro. Chiaro means clear or light in Italian, and oscuro means dark. The golden age of Renaissance art lasted from 1490 to 1520. Famous artists of the time were Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, and Raphael Sanzio. One of da Vinci's most famous works is the Mona Lisa. He also painted The Last Supper, which shows Jesus with his disciples. Da Vinci showed the feelings of the disciples through their positions and gestures. Michelangelo painted and sculpted. He tried to show realistic human beings with feelings and emotions. Michelangelo also painted the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel in Rome with images from the Christian Bible. The figures he painted have muscular bodies that show their power. Raphael was one of the best painters in Italy. He is best known for a fresco called the School of Athens. It shows many Greek philosophers. Some women, like the daughters of nobles, contributed to the arts. Artemisia Gentileschi was one of the first women to paint important historical and religious scenes. The Northern Renaissance. In the late 1400s, the Renaissance spread to Northern Europe and later to England. War, trade, travel, and the printing press spread humanist ideas. The Northern Renaissance took place in present-day Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, and the Netherlands. Northern artists painted with oil paints. Oils created richer colors and allowed more detail. Jan van Eyck was a Flemish painter. His best-known painting is the Anna Finney portrait. It shows a newly married couple. Every fold in their rich clothes and every detail in the room are visible. Albrecht Dürer was an important Renaissance artist from Germany. He is best known for his engravings. An engraving is made from an image carved in metal, wood, or stone. Ink is put on the surface, then the image is printed on paper. Dürer's Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse shows four men on horses who announce the end of the world. In England, the Renaissance theatre was very popular. Playwrights, or writers of plays, wrote about people's strengths, weaknesses, and feelings. The greatest playwright of the time was William Shakespeare. He wrote comedies, historical plays, and tragedies. A tragedy is a play in which the main character suffers great loss or pain. Some of Shakespeare's most famous works are Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare's plays are still very popular. Early calls for reform. In 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther challenged the Catholic Church. At first, Martin Luther wanted only to reform, or change, the Catholic Church. This is why these events are called the Reformation. By the end of the Reformation, Europe had many new Christian churches. Church officials had grown rich by selling indulgences. An indulgence was a certificate that said a person would not be punished for his or her sins. Many Catholics became angry at the church for focusing on money. In the 1370s, an English priest named John Wycliffe said that Jesus was the head of the church, not the Pope. Wycliffe wanted everyone to read the Bible, so he translated parts of it from Latin into English. After he died, his followers finished translating it. Renaissance humanism led to Christian humanism. Its goal was to restore the simple faith of the early church. A Dutch scholar named Desiderius Erasmus wrote that people should use their reason to become better Christians. He believed that people should be good in their everyday lives. Luther's Reformation. Martin Luther's disagreement with the Catholic Church led to a big change in Christianity. Luther decided that Catholic Church teachings were wrong. He said that a person needed only faith, and not good works, in order to go to heaven. In 1517, Pope Leo X told church leaders to sell indulgences to get money for a new cathedral. Luther was angry. He wrote a list of 95 reasons why indulgences were wrong. The list became known as the 95 Theses. People across the German kingdoms read them. Luther began to attack other Catholic beliefs. He said popes could make mistakes when they taught about Christianity. He argued that all Christians had a right to read the Bible. He said Christians could confess their sins to God without the help of a priest. Pope Leo X thought Luther was dangerous. He made Luther leave the Catholic Church. Luther's ideas led to a new branch of Christianity, called Lutheranism. It was the first Protestant church. It was based on three main ideas. Belief in Jesus, not good works, brings a place in heaven. The Bible is the final source for truth about God. The church includes all believers, not just the clergy. Many German rulers made their kingdoms Lutheran. They took land from Catholic monasteries. In addition, rulers could set their own church taxes and keep the money for themselves. Protestant rulers became stronger. The Catholic Church became weaker. These changes angered the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. Charles V went to war with the Lutheran German rulers, but could not defeat them. Finally, an agreement named the Peace of Augsburg made most of northern Germany Protestant territory. The south stayed Catholic. This division still exists today. The Reformation spreads. Martin Luther's Reformation spread across Europe. John Calvin agreed with Martin Luther and added other ideas, too. Calvin's main idea was that God has decided who will go to heaven and who will not. This belief is called predestination. This means that no matter what people do, God has decided the final outcome of all events. Another important idea of Calvinism is that kings and bishops should not control the church. The people of the church should choose their own elders and ministers. His ideas influenced people in England, Scotland, and the Netherlands. Calvinism began to give people the idea that they could elect government leaders. The Reformation in England. In England, King Henry VIII was stubborn and impatient. He wanted a son to rule after him. Unfortunately, he had only a daughter with his wife Catherine. Henry wanted to annul, or end, his marriage. An annulment says that the marriage never happened. Then he could remarry. The Pope refused. So Henry had the highest-ranking church official in England end his marriage to Catherine. He then married Anne Boleyn. Because of that, the Pope excommunicated Henry from the Catholic Church. Henry had Parliament pass the Act of Supremacy. This made the king, not the Pope, the head of the Church of England. Henry ordered all priests and bishops to accept him as the new head of the church. Some who refused were killed. Henry took the Catholic Church's land in England. He gave some of the land to his nobles so they would stay loyal to him. When Henry's oldest daughter Mary became queen, she wanted to make England a Catholic country again. Mary arrested or executed many Protestants. When she died, her half-sister Elizabeth became queen. She was a Protestant, so she brought back the Anglican Church. A group of Protestants called Puritans wanted to purify the Anglican Church of its Catholic ways. Queen Elizabeth I put up with the Puritans, but James I did not. James I and the king who came after him, Charles I, mistreated the Puritans. Many Puritans moved to America so they could practice their religion freely. These colonies became the states of Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. The Catholic Reformation. In the 1500s and 1600s, the Catholic Church tried to stop Protestantism. This was called the Catholic Reformation. The Catholic Church knew it needed to change. Pope Paul III called a church meeting at Trent, Italy. The Council of Trent made Catholic beliefs clear. It also ended many abuses. For example, the Catholic Church stopped selling indulgences. The council set up strict rules for how bishops and priests should act. They were told to work harder at teaching the faith. The Catholic Church set up seminaries to train priests. A seminary is a special school for educating priests. Spain was formed in 1469 when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella married and joined their two kingdoms. They wanted a strong nation. They thought if everyone in Spain were Catholic, Spain would be united and loyal. Muslims had ruled much of Spain during the Middle Ages. Catholics, Jews, and Muslims lived together with few problems at that time. Christians and Jews had to pay special taxes and had limited rights, but they were allowed to practice their own religions. This religious harmony ended when Catholics took over Spain. Jews and Muslims were no longer welcome. Spain's rulers set up the Spanish Inquisition to find out people's religious beliefs. The Spanish Inquisition was a Catholic court. It was designed to uncover heresy, or beliefs that opposed church teachings. The Spanish Inquisition used torture and executions. About 2,000 Spaniards were killed. In 1492, Ferdinand and Isabella ordered all Jews to become Catholic or leave the country. 10 years later, they ordered Muslims to do the same. Church and government controls did not stop writers and artists in Catholic Spain. Miguel de Cervantes was a writer. He wrote the novel Don Quixote about a funny knight and his servant. Religious wars. By the mid-1500s, Christians in Europe were divided. Most Northern Europeans were Protestant. Most Southern Europeans were Catholic. Differences in religions led to wars in Europe. These wars lasted until about 1650. During the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, England was the strongest Protestant power in Europe. Spain, led by King Philip II, was the strongest Catholic power. When Elizabeth helped the Protestant Dutch rebel against Spain, Philip grew angry. He decided to invade England. In 1588, Philip sent a huge fleet, called the Spanish Armada, to England through the English Channel. This is the narrow body of water between England and Europe. The Spanish ships were large and had many guns. However, they were hard to steer. The smaller English ships moved faster. They drove back the Armada. Then there was a great storm and many Spanish ships were lost. The Protestant English had defeated the Catholic Spanish. During the 1500s, most people in France were Catholic. Wealthy people, though, became Protestant. They were called Huguenots. They followed the ideas of John Calvin. Many French nobles wanted to be able to practice their religion freely. They also wanted to weaken the power of the King of France. A civil war broke out between Protestants and Catholics in France. The Huguenots were led by Henry of Navarre, who became King Henry IV of France. He wanted people to be loyal to him. He decided to change his religion, or convert, to Catholicism. He thought that being the King of France was more important than being Protestant. Henry worked to end the religious war in France. He issued an edict, or order, when he visited the city of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes said that Catholicism was the official religion of France. However, it also gave Huguenots the right to worship as they wanted. The worst religious war of the Reformation began when Protestant nobles in Bohemia turned against the Catholic king. The war lasted for 30 years. France, Sweden, and Denmark sent troops to help the Protestants. Spain and the Holy Roman Empire supported the Catholics. Even though France was a Catholic country, it helped the Protestants in order to win territory and wealth. The war was not just about religion. The German people suffered greatly in the war. Finally, in 1643, the Holy Roman Emperor asked for peace. To end the war, the countries signed the Peace of Westphalia. After the war, Spain and the Holy Roman Empire were weaker. France was a stronger nation.